So welcome everyone to Lockdown Live from the Yorkshire Wilds. I'm Robert Fuller, wildlife artist, and I'm going to talk to you today about my painting work and this painting in particular. So this has been a painting that I've had in mind for quite a while, and I'm now painting it as a commission for someone. And this is Bandita, the stoat that lives in the garden, and then some partridges. And I can show you where I'm up to at the moment, just by putting it a little bit closer to you so you can get an idea of where I'm heading with this painting. And this is Bandita just having a little cheeky look at these partridges. She would really have her work cut out catching something as large as a partridge, but she had a feeding area in here where I put food for her, and quite often the partridges would have some sort of interaction with her, and even the pheasants, but the size of her, she doesn't really stand much of a chance of actually catching one of these. But I kept seeing these wonderful little moments where she was interacting with the game birds in the garden, so I'm doing a picture of it now. So yeah, it's just to keep you, for people that didn't see the last video, I'll just bring you up to speed on how I produced this painting. So this is the background colours already gone down, and I'm drawing out the partridges here, and then Bandita. And again, I'm just putting the basic colours in there, and I'm not really that worried about getting the colours exactly right. It's a case of just covering the area where these animals are, because what I don't want is for any of the background colours to show through the stoats as I get further on. So there's quite a few layers go on there to make sure we've got the subjects absolutely completely covered. So I'll give you a real close look at Bandita now. It's all back to Francis Hardwick Traitor. So this is Bandita the stoat, and then the partridges that she's looking at. So it gives you an idea of where I've got up to. There's a lot of detailing still to go into this painting. I'll do one more video on this painting so you can see it, getting more complete. But this is the sort of where I'm up to at the moment. So there's a lot of detailing to go into the wall, because that everything I do, I work from dark to light, because just the light bits usually are closer towards you, and that's how I get the sort of, eventually get the three-dimensional looking stage to the painting. So all of these parts are actually painted a little darker than they're actually going to be in actuality when they're finished. So I'll show you a few clips of Bandita as well. She was born here in 2016, just down the valley here, and she's a fabulous stoat. She goes white in winter, ermine, and she's the only one that I've had that does go white in winter. And this is a very typical picture of her. This is 4 times slower than actuality, of her just licking her lips, but you can see those really distinctive nicks in her ear. That shows it's Bandita. She got those nicks, 2 from tawny owls, from Bomber actually, the tawny owl in the garden, and 1 from her daughter Crackle, who I've also painted. Yeah, but she's a real character, very wild, hard to study, and that's why I enjoy studying her so much, because she is really difficult. So I'm just going to do a bit of painting next and just show you. Nothing really moves quickly when I get to this stage with the painting. It's all very detailed stuff. For a lot of the painting now, I'll be working with brushes, which are number 2 brushes. Give you an idea of the size. There's my finger, and there is the brush. So this is the size of brush I'll be using from now onwards on the stoats and the partridges. I never go smaller than a number 2. These are Pro Arty brushes, actually made in Yorkshire, from Yorkshire. Yeah, I don't go beyond that sort of size of brush now. And now for this area, the sort of biggest brush I'll probably use is something like this one, which is about half as thick as my finger. So that'll be the other brush I'll be using. I've got a whole load of brushes around here. Got hog hair brushes, quite like these brushes as well. But I might be using some of those in the background, because what I've done with the stonework, I've actually put a bit of texture in this isn't the palette I'm working on, my palette's in there, but this is an oil painting palette, and quite often I get this sort of dry paint around the edges, and during the day I'll be painting the Stoat, quite detailed work, and it gets to the evening and my eyes are getting tired and I'm getting tired, so I then will start using some of, this is oil paint, so I won't be using it on this one because that's an acrylic, but I'll give you an idea of what my palette looks like with the oil paintings, and I'll actually start utilising some of the more crusty paint and actually using that to texture up. It's no good for my refined work anymore, and I'll be using that to texture up the actual stonework. So any paint that's slightly going, slightly setting, and sometimes I'll even just chop it up with a scalpel to create a texture, and then put it on with a bigger brush and stipple it on just to create a texture of the stone, because if you actually feel the painting, it wants to feel a little bit like the subject that I'm working on. So for the fur, I always paint with the fur and nearly always paint with the feathers to get that effect. So I'll just do a bit of painting now if Will wants to come in closer just before he moves the camera. If there's any questions, I'll take any questions today. Only easy ones, I don't want any difficult questions. So I'll do some painting and Will can move the camera closer in and have a look. So I'm just mixing some colours, and as I sort of said in the last video, what I'm trying to do is create a sense of light in the painting, not just painting the subject on its own. And I'm going to do Bandita's back, and I could kind of do it like this, but it's not a very natural way for my hand to work, so instead I'm going to paint it. Am I going to paint it like that, or am I going to paint it like that? I might paint it like that. So just so I'm working with my hand in the most natural way possible, I will actually move the painting accordingly, because I want my brush strokes at the moment to go like that, because that's how my hand works. It's not fully articulated, so it's always best to work with the way your hand actually works, especially with a painting of this size. I can just turn it. If it's a massive painting, I won't be able to turn it around like this, but I want to be able to see what I'm actually working at, and I don't want my hands or fingers in the way. So I'm just trying to get a sense of light coming in from this direction, hitting the back, and it'll hit across the back of her ears here. So this is what I spend days and days doing now on this painting, is just these little tiny brush marks. And it's just a case of just picking any other little areas up, and then on her underside as well, along here, you know, that's sort of in shadow, but it's always good to pick little areas of light up around the feet, around each toe, just to give her. So we go from the light into a shadow, and then I always pick up, like on the back of a leg here, just some tiny little bits here. So the light's just like picking up on the fur. It doesn't need much, just a little bit. And it doesn't want to be consistent right the way through, so it looks more natural. And even on this sort of size, it's quite small, the head. I want to actually look like Bandita. I don't want it just to look like a stoat in general. This is an animal that I know, so I want to make it look like her. So all of her little fleck marks that she's got, I want to get them in. Yeah, so send your questions in if you have any questions, and I'll answer those in a minute. But that gives you an idea of how I paint. Bandita. Normally I'll just stick with her until she's done, but I'm kind of jumping around a little bit all over at the moment, and this is another area that I can show you that I'm working on, and this kind of takes a little bit of concentration. This bit, it's yeah, tricky little bit. So I'm going to start putting, so I generally paint all of the, all one tone and then start adding the detail in afterwards. So all these little fleck markings, there's some quite bold ones down here. I'll get those ones in. So these little markings take a lot of doing, but it's important to get these right. So in general, as we head round the curvature of the partridge's neck, I'm going to leave, I might even exaggerate what I see on the photograph. I'm going to leave wider spaces here, and the markings are going to get tighter and smaller as we go around the body of the bird, and that just helps give it more of a three-dimensional effect, that these markings are getting tighter, smaller as we head round the body.
So this actually comes to one of our questions.
Mm-hmm.
Smiles Lordoff asks, did you use a photograph for this? And I think this proves a point here.
Yeah, I use several photographs. You know, I take a lot of video, I take a lot of photographs, and yeah, they're the basis for a lot of my paintings, my observations, and then the pictures and videos that I take. Yeah, I don't just make things up like this. It's yeah, I need a reference point, basically. Any more questions?
Lynn Yeomans asks, are these native partridges or are they reared partridges?
So these are reared partridges. So these are red-leg partridges, also known as the French partridge, and these are reared for like the shooting industry. Our native ones are grey partridges, and they're quite a rare sight nowadays.
Oliver Woodcock on YouTube asks, what is the probability of seeing kites on the stream, and what are the chances of seeing a buzzard nest cam next spring?
Oh, God, there's a question. No pressure that in. So the chances of seeing kites on the stream are quite slim. We do have them in the area, and they do go down onto carrion, but they occasionally have gone down to where our buzzard camera is if I spread the food out over a wider area and just leave it in little bits, because what kites don't like to do, especially around here, is to land on the floor for very long. So they like to pick stuff up on the wing and go. They're just literally in and out and take the food away. So in certain areas, I mean, people have them in the UK going into the gardens. In general, that doesn't happen around here. They're much wilder, the kites around here. So I have had them taking food from near the buzzard station. I've had them taking food in the garden from the feeding post, and if anything's dropped on the floor. But they're an unusual bird. I've tried doing feeding stations for them, which haven't been greatly successful, and literally you'll be driving on the way home and there'll be 5 or 6 buzzards on, 5 or 6 kites on the road eating some carrion on the road when I've been sitting in a hide for like 6 or 7 hours, which is quite frustrating. But they are a trickier thing in this area, so we'll always have our fingers crossed. And a buzzard nest, yeah, so I have a buzzard nest on the other side of the field from my house, but we don't have any power going there, and to do a live stream nest we need power, and that one's in a beech tree. And about 3 fields over, we're looking at a buzzard's nest at the moment to put a camera on there, but it's quite a technical thing. It's right up a tree, very high, up a larch tree, and if I put a camera in now, I've got to have a camera that has things like a windscreen wiper on it, so that then the size of the camera gets bigger, and if I put a camera in there, you know, I don't want to put a buzzard off because they're quite wary. So it's a case of the balance, because they're often, this nest that I've seen in a larch tree, it's at the top of the larch tree, so it's then how we get a camera positioned in there. But it's something I'm looking at over the next week, and I will need a lot more cable to achieve this. It's 600 metres away from a house, so I would have to hard cable all the way there with armoured cable, but we're looking at it, and if we can bring you it, we will.
So, London Calling has asked to know a bit more about your easel, which I think is a good one for this art stream.
It is, yeah. Yes, this is, it's all been purpose built by myself. I suffer with a bad back, and because of all these huge pieces of tree stump that I lift and things. Yes, this is something I've actually made. Underneath here is an architect's drawing board down here. So the base of the architect's drawing board is there, and over the years I've completely converted it. So I've made this drawing board, and this used to be on a ratchet system, so it would actually it would almost go flat, and then I'd bring it up in stages on a ratchet system. But I've actually I've now fixed it at this level, because when I'm painting I don't want anything to move at all, and when people would walk in here, my drawing board would move. So this is literally, it's actually connected to the beams in the roof as well as the floor. So this is as solid as I can make it, so when people walk in the room this doesn't move or quiver. So it's got a lot of structural work up above us, but the main sort of exciting thing about this is that I took parts of the architect's drawing board off and made this part of it, and I also made it that I could actually angle it. So this is a section off the big architect's drawing board that I cut down, so I can angle the painting wherever I like and move it to wherever I like. It's got pegs in here at the side, so I know where I kind of want it sometimes, and that holds up heavier boards with oil paintings on. And everything's to reach. It's complete chaos around here at the moment, but I can reach everything I need from here. Drawers here, brushes here, paints there. So I don't need to travel around much. I can just literally work here for hours and hours at a time. So this is something that's developed over the years. But this is the main advantage, and this is simply done by a weight mechanism, and it really works. But I've had this since before I was 20, and I've made it into this over the years.
So Victoria Louise House on Facebook asks, why is she called Bandita?
She's called Bandita because when she was born, she was called Tash. She has a little moustache underneath her nose, a dark moustache, so she was called Tash in her younger years, and after 2 years she appeared back in the garden as a white stoat, and then the only part of her that wasn't white was 2 little rings round each eyes, and it looked like she had a mask on, so we called her Bandita, like a bandit. And that name stuck rather than Tash, and it wasn't until she turned brown in the autumn that I actually recognised who she was, because I photographed the individual stoats in the garden, and they're all nearly named, so I know them all individually for when they crop up in the future. And then it wasn't until she was brown again in the spring that I realised who she was.
What have we got here? Kelly Myers on YouTube asks, when do stoats usually breed, and how long until the young are born?
Yeah, so stoats can actually, well, they do actually do delayed implantation, so they're mated within a week sometimes of them actually giving birth, so we've filmed that actually happening. One gave birth, Bandita's daughter gave birth literally a few metres away from where I am now underneath a flat roof, and she was mated exactly a week after she gave birth. She does then delayed implantation until the following year, which is in our country we're looking at end of March, April time. They give birth, and this is very fixed with Stoats for that time of year, whereas weasels literally can breed, they can have up to 3 litters a year if the food's there, so they're much more reactive with the food prey. So if we have a good volia, they can react to that and build up their numbers, whereas Stoats are very fixed with that delayed implantation. And then the thing that would be illegal for humans, the kits can also be mated from about 2 weeks old, because they can be tiny and blind, and they can actually do delayed implantation. So a male will often try and woo the female, but also try and gain access to the litter of kits to make them.
Sue Ringle asks, do Stoats have big families?
Oh yes, yeah. So Bandita's had some fairly good litters. She's had some 7s, 8, and a litter of 9. So they do have big litters. They can have up to 13. 9 is the biggest litter I've known here in the garden now.
Linda Holdsworth asks, how do Stoats catch and kill their prey?
Stoats are ferocious little predators. They just literally chase their prey items down. They can chase a rabbit down, and it doesn't look like they're going to catch up with it somehow, and somehow they do. But a lot of it's fear as well. When they catch a bigger rabbit, they can become very startled, and fear almost takes over from the rabbit. And some will fight and give a struggle. Some will fight to defend their young with rabbits, so they'll fight the Stoats off. But they can have great battles with things like fully grown rats, even grey squirrels. They'll even climb trees to try and catch squirrels, and if they get them down on the ground, they will sort of tackle a grey squirrel, which they've got really sharp claws, big teeth, and very got a lot of control. Rabbits can kick, but squirrels can grip, which gives them a real run for the money.
So Nicholas August, one of our fantastic moderators on YouTube, asks, will you make prints of this?
Yeah, we can do prints of any picture that we produce, so it's possible with any picture we can produce. They're all scanned, so we do runs of prints which are just like special orders, and we also do a list of prints that we do that are stock items.
So Mariel Davis asks, does patience come naturally, or have you had to work at it?
It's quite unusual, really. I'm very patient with some things, and other things I'm not patient with at all. So I'm dyslexic. Couldn't do all this writing and reading nonsense at school, but I could paint and draw for hours or days on end. So I'm selective with my patience. I can do this and study wildlife, but other things it's just like nope.
So we have one final question here from Jenny Comerford, who's one of our supporters on Facebook. So thank you for your support. What are the survival rates of Stoke kits, and how far do they disperse? Sorry.
Yeah, so it's it depends on the area where they live, but and they're not a long-lived animal, so they will disperse reasonable distances, but the males will disperse a lot more. You're still looking at under 6-7 kilometres for a Stoke dispersal usually, but they are extraordinary animals, and the more space they have to move, the more they will. So especially males, so you'll get males that will range over a much bigger area, maybe up to a couple of 100 acres, and they'll range that area covering a lot of females' territories. But there's different sort of categories for the Stoats, especially the male Stoats. There's some that stay quite tight in the home range, and there's some that really have this thing in their head that they literally think they're going to go out and conquer a bigger area, and they are individual the way they do this. There's a lot of research into this sort of behaviour in places like New Zealand. I know the scientists there, because they are an invasive species there, and I do have sort of discussions, a lot of discussions with them out there, because there is an eradication program out there, and Stoats simply shouldn't be there. So I don't mind helping, throwing ideas back and forth with that, because they are wiping out species out there. And I think the scientists I spoke to, Stoats will swim 4-5 kilometres out to sea, maybe even further, onto these little islands that are supposedly pristine and predator proof, and then they'll swim onto another island. And what actually drives these stoats to do that is a mystery. They have this incredible sense of adventure in a way, that they will swim 4 or 5 kilometres out into the sea to hit an island. And you've imagined a little stoat this long in a sea that's doing this. It's just incredible how they have that ability to do that. If you threw us in the sea, even if we knew where we were going as humans, we would struggle, even if we had all our wetsuits and everything else, to hit an island 5 miles out at sea or 5 kilometres. So there's a lot of research being done into this sort of behaviour, because they're trying to work out an eradication program, whereas here in the UK, they're part of our wildlife here, so there's less of a drive to actually find out this information.
So that's all the questions we've had today. I think the final thing is that we've had a lot of people asking for a brief Whisper and Stuart update. So if you have anything to say on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so Whisper and Stuart are out now, wild in the garden, and amongst our wild stoats, it's always difficult. That's the next thing I'm going to be doing over the next few days, is combing through all of those cameras out on the outside. They've stopped using the badger set and that aviary, but there's more food going from the stone wall. There's a lot of stoat sightings. So we have our stoats that live within the garden, and we've now got to try and tease out of the footage which one's actually which is quite a big job. So, but they are out and about, and it was a very gradual release, which was great. That's what we wanted, really, for them to gradually start moving out. And they will go out and find their own territory. They're not bound to stay here at all. Some of the owls stay with us, some of them leave, and it's the same with the stoats. Bandita will, at some point, be wanting her territory back. So, right, well, thank you for joining us, everyone, and join us again tomorrow, and we're going to do another live event for you. But thanks for all your support, and we'll see you tomorrow.